Which province is better to start my business in Canada? Well, we get this question a lot, and we'll talk about 12 things to consider when deciding where to start a business in Canada. There's a link here in the description where you can see how we can help businesses of different sizes at different stages in this journey to success in Canada. But let's get at it. First of all, we separated into two parts here what we're gonna tell you, okay? We're gonna talk to you about 5 things that are mostly similar regardless where you choose as a base in Canada. And then we're gonna talk about 7 things that may be significantly different depending where you decide to establish yourself, okay? So let's look first at the 5 things that are mostly similar. First, of course, Canada, if you started doing your research, you can see that Canada has 10 provinces and territories, different jurisdictions, and you have pretty much the same legal system but with different jurisdictions. What it means pretty much, yes, there are very small differences from one province to the next. For example, a lawyer licensed in Ontario cannot practice law necessarily in Alberta, right? They need to have both provincial bars to practice law. But other than that, the law that works as a framework for the whole country is the same for all of the country. The bureaucracies and how to deal with governments, these things are very similar. The regulatory environment may have some provincial differences, but by and large, if you're coming especially from an emerging country, there will be more differences between where you're coming from in Canada than between 2 of the Canadian provinces. So in terms of the legal system, bureaucracy, and regulatory environment, there are mostly similarities no matter which province you're talking about. The other thing that's also very similar is the government support. Okay, but the government from this province may give you a most favorable term than the other. That's true. And sometimes even municipal governments, right? That will show up when you have a very specific local interest to generate growth. But by and large, the whole idea of government being on your side, that's very similar as well. So federal government programs, I mean, there's over, 1,000 programs in Canada that will help as incentive to businesses coming here. So of course, you're gonna have differences between one place to the other, but I would say materially, massively, these are mostly similar. You will have access to similar benefits no matter where you go. Taxation, yes, there are some differences in tax rates, and for example, a big one, some places don't charge provincial rates, and some remote locations may give very significant tax incentives. But taxation, again, this is another thing that probably there's more difference between your country of origin and Canada than there is between 2 Canadian provinces, right? So yes, provincial taxes or even some federal taxes may give you a specific incentive to go to a more remote location, to a smaller population center, but by and large, it's the same tax code, okay? Of course, there are some differences in course, but by and large, the costs, again, another situation where it's probably more similar between Canadian provinces than any given province and back home in terms of housing costs and wages. I mean, if you've been reading any news about Canada, you know that housing cost is a problem. It costs a lot of money here, and wages and salaries will have some variation between provinces and sometimes cities within the same province, big city, small city kind of thing. But the costs are similar. So these are mostly similar things, right? And of course, access and quality of healthcare and education is also very similar no matter which province you go. So these are like the 5 things that are mostly similar. I say mostly because they're not identical, there are differences, but they're materially more similar between Canadian provinces and among Canadian provinces than they are between anything in Canada and another country. Let's look at what may differ more significantly. What are the things that tend to be really more different between 2 of the Canadian provinces that you choose? First thing, and this is where we start to get into how you choose, right? How you choose. Well, you need to understand what kind of environment you are more comfortable with and where you want to continue to operate. Because, for example, number 1 in our list here is how similar or different the new location in Canada is from your place of origin. For example, are you used to big cities? Do you want to be in a bustling big city? Or are you used to being in a smaller location? Are you used to being closer? Do you have to be closer to your market? Or it's okay because whatever you produce, it's independent of where you are, foot traffic and people driving around. So it's important for you to think about these things, right? Large versus small city, far versus near some of the key markets. So how similar and how different these things are from between where you are and where you think about locating yourself. So if you're coming from a big city, of course you're going to think about a Canadian big city. If you're coming from an area that's a little more remote, it's okay, you're used to that. I mean, I doubt you're used to the Canadian cold and weather, but that idea that you have to travel to be close to the big market, it's not going to be an idea that's foreign to you. So maybe you're going to be more comfortable doing that in Canada too. Okay? So second thing is market size and proximity. Same thing, right? I mean, do you need foot traffic? Do you need people walking by your business? Do you need to visit people one-on-one to be selling your product and servicing your clients? If that is the case, the proximity and size of the market is important to your business model. Of course, you want to find population centers in Canada that have that characteristic. And not only in terms of province, but even within the province, you want to be closer to certain places, right? And on the other hand, if what you do is pretty much online, a software, it's in the cloud, it's irrelevant where you were positioned, why would you spend a lot of cost to be close to a center where housing costs and wages are very high if you can do the same kind of work with the same productivity in a much lower cost and access to much better housing and all that kind of stuff. So that's for you to decide, right? Third thing to consider is competition and barriers to enter, because this is a dangerous thing, right? That showed up already in other videos we have here. People sometimes think, oh, I'm gonna go there because there's no competition. I will be the only one doing that. Well, we have to be careful with that, right? Because maybe there's a reason nobody buys what you sell in that location, right? The market doesn't want that. So it could be a great opportunity. Well, nobody thought about that. You're the first one thinking about that. So you're going to be the pioneer, establish yourself, and you're going to own the market. Good for you. Or maybe a lot of people tried and got hurt before because there are certain characteristics of that market. They just don't go for what you sell. So the existence of competition, it's harder for you to establish yourself. On the other hand, it shows you that there's a market for what you're trying to sell. And then how hard it is once you go establish yourself, how hard it is for somebody else to say, hey, look at these guys doing that. They're doing great. Let's do the same thing. Let's sell the same thing. So like the existence of competition and barriers to entry, it's something that you know better than anybody for your specific industry, but that plays a role when choosing where you're going to be located. If you're moving to a place where people know by heart what you sell, they're very familiar with what you're selling, you can count on that market. Then you're going to have to compete with the established competitors, right? Versus you're moving to a place where nobody heard about what you're trying to sell, then you're going to have to prepare for that. You know, there's going to be some education required. Is the market large enough to absorb what you want to do? Can you fend off competitors that suddenly decide to come after you, right? So you have to consider these things. The fourth thing here we need to think about is talent, right? The place you're going to locate, the province or the city you're going to locate in Canada, do you need that in that location you have a availability of talent and maybe an innovation hub there? Is that important to you? Or is that something that your firm you're going to be doing by yourself, and maybe with a remote team in other locations, you don't necessarily need to be part of that innovation community and that pool of talent? That's extremely important. If talent, the physical existence and presence of talent and innovation hub is important to you, that's where you have to go. You have to fish where there's fish, right? Or you have to go where the talent is so that you can nurture the growth of your business. The fifth thing, of course, is quality of life. That's typically a very personal consideration. There is that, for example, the urban feeling. Some people, grew up in places where it's very urban. There's traffic, there's sounds of horn and all that kind of stuff. So are you going to be comfortable being in a remote area where you don't hear anything? It's very silent, right? Or on the other hand, if you grew up or you come from a place where, traffic is not an issue, do you really want to be in a busy city? So again, it's important internal consideration for you. So you see, it's interesting because in the video we're talking about which province is better, but you see what we're doing here is all provinces can be good, every city can be good, it depends on you. So it's about your self-knowledge, about what you want, what you like, what you're used to. And I guarantee you're gonna find something in Canada that's a good fit for your preferences, but you have to look at yourself first, right? But let's go back to our list. Number 6 is immigration path. Sometimes some locations, because they're being experiencing population decline or economic slow growth or something like that, you will have some more favorable conditions to attract people, investors, immigrant investors and all that. So that typically shows up in provincial nominee programs, sometimes with very local characteristics. It's possible that that's a consideration for you. And finally, remember language, right? Yes, Canada, people say, oh, Canada is bilingual. It's not like that. Like, it's not like everybody in Canada speaks equally well both English and French, and all the documents are bilingual, and no matter what. There are different places in Canada where specific language is going to be more prevalent, right? For example, Quebec, right? Quebec, you will need at a certain point in your business to be using French. On the other hand, if you only speak French and you're coming to Canada, to Ontario or to Alberta, well, you may have the challenge to build your network of people that also speak French. So the bilingualism is not something that means everybody in Canada speaks equally well English and French, and business is conducted equally in both languages. You have to know, again, yourself, your language capabilities, and how you're going to relate with your market and your suppliers and your employees in the language that you're comfortable with. You need to understand the place you're coming from a language standpoint. So what are the highlights of this video here? Again, you need to think carefully about what's more important to you. It's not about, oh, there's this province and it's better. If it was like this, everybody would move to a certain place, right? And there's people moving to Canada to many, many different places. That means different places work better for different people, right? There's not a one size fits all. There's not like a one golden province, one golden city where everybody should be moving to. No, you will be received with open arms by competent and nice people everywhere in Canada. Big city, small city, French-speaking, English-speaking, remote community, crowded urban center. Canadians are nice in general, right? But then how do you prepare and how do you decide? Well, click the link here. We have the program Your Business in Canada that may be just right what you need right now. Thank you.